Well guys, here we are. We have another bicycle video here. Well, of course, in front of us here we have one of my own personal bikes. This ain't my high-end bike. This is one of my low-end, cruising around type of bikes. This one here is a Giant brand bike. It is the Boulder model, I suppose. Of course, the 21 speed bike, hardtail. It does have front suspension. I really haven't done much in terms of modifications to this bike. I did add a more of a comfortable seat to it. It was one out of my collection from a parts bike that I parted out who knows how long ago. Well, of course, due to a back injury, I cannot hunch over like I used to. So I need to do something different about the longer reach of, well, this here handlebars, right? So pretty much through my wonderful hoarding of bicycle parts, I happen to have a shorter stem to go on there. Basically it would go on there and take probably about 1.5 inches out of the reach. It's not really a high-rise stem per se, it's just a little bit shorter. If that doesn't work, the next thing I need to do is buy an extension that effectively raises this up 2 or 3 more inches. So for now, we will try this and see how that goes. So of course, to change this out, this is one of those things that I've decided to share with you guys because it can be a little bit difficult. First thing I would do is undo these 2 bolts. The handlebars will separate from the stem. Then pretty much you undo these 2 bolts, and the stem itself will start to wiggle back and forth from, well, the fork. Then you undo this here bolt. But before you undo that bolt completely, you want to hold the fork, because as soon as the pressure's off that bolt, the fork will fall completely out of the bike. And of course, then the bearings and all that, you could have a bigger problem there. So you want to, kind of hold that in place. I suppose you could put a bungee around it if you want, or get a friend to hold her. But basically, guys, I'll throw you on the old tripod. We'll get this changed, and away we go. So of course, loosening these 2 bolts depends on the bike. Sometimes these are aluminum, sometimes they're steel. Either way, be careful not to cross-thread them. Take these bolts out, set them aside, because, well, the stem itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It'll work for a parts bike or so. Or if you were to sell this bike, you might want to keep your short stem for, another bike. Or of course, if the short stem doesn't work out, then, you're going to want to put the long one back into it, right? Now, I always like to put the hardware back into the item. Then that way everything stays together, you're not losing nothing. And, well, everything's still, good to go for next time. Now over here is those 2 bolts I was telling you about. Crack them loose. Now you don't have to take these ones out, just make sure they're good and loose. Now of course for the top one here, this is where it can get a little tricky. Now, like I said, pretty much as you loosen this, the fork itself is going to get a lot of play in it and pretty much want to fall out of the bike. Now you can, like I said, get a friend, use a bungee, just make sure you don't lose any of the pieces that happen to fall out of the fork when, well, it starts to move. So slide your stem off, like that, set it aside. We'll put your short one on. Now, of course, depends on the bike. As you see here, our stem we took out is shorter than the one we're putting in. So, of course, just take one of the little spacers out. Then slide the new stem right on her. Then basically put your top bolt back in her. Then of course try to lift up on the fork, taking out some of the slack that's in there. using your wrench, just give that top bolt a snug down. You know, don't over tighten it, or you will pull out the little nut that's in the bottom of that fork, and then you're going to have trouble. So of course now spin around the stem, kind of eyeball it sort of half straight with the front tire, and then of course give these a little bit of a snug down. So now we'll throw the handlebars back on her. Now of course it's going to look a little bit odd, I suppose, with a gray stem and black handlebars, but at the same time, you know, you could take the time and give her a paint or so, or you could have changed out these black handlebars for the gray ones that were on the stem originally. But again, you know, that's a little extra time that if you don't want to spend working on your bike instead of riding it, then you don't, right? So of course make sure the bars are centered in the opening of the stem. You know, make sure they're not off to one side or, you know, or the other or so. And the easiest way I found to do that is to look at the dirt mark. If you can see a wear mark, dirt mark or so, then of course they're offside, right? So give those a tighten on down. You know, don't have to super tighten them, because you're still going to want to rotate, you know, the handlebars to your liking. And then of course the next step requires to take the bike out of the stand or have it on the ground. Now we got to make sure there's no play in the headset. If there's play, it will ovalize the headset and render the frame of the bike basically garbage. Make sure everything's good and tight, good and lined up, and then it's ready for the ride. Okay guys, so here we go. Pretty much got the bike on the ground here. What I like to do is loosen both of these bolts, and the top bolt, you know, line the stem up with the tire. By putting the bicycle on the ground, the frame will push down on the fork will push up in the frame, and that'll help to tighten everything down. And of course, once everything's tightened on down, give her a double check by locking up the front brakes, rocking the bike back and forth. If you feel a clunk, try to decide where she's coming from. If it's coming from the forks, then you're okay. If it's coming from the headset, then you better tighten her on up, or you're going to have a problem. Well guys, there we go. Pretty much got the stem all tightened down, everything good to go for another ride and all that. Basically, like I said, you know, loosen these two bolts, loosen this bolt, you know, remove the handlebars. Make sure not to let the fork fall out the bottom, but if you do, make sure you put the parts back together pretty much the way they come apart. And of course, you know, give this bolt a snug on down, line up the steering, make sure the fork's got, you know, fairly good tension on her. Don't over tighten that main top bolt. Tighten the two side ones, you know, check for play. If there's play, then pretty much, you know, loosen and tighten again, and then away you go. Of course guys, you know, this was a fairly easy one this time around. You know, kind of give things a bit of a once over, bit of a tighten, and she's now ready for another ride. But pretty much guys, as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's World. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.